Dames en heren, goedemiddag.
Hoi hoi, hello and welcome to the Meet Maastricht podcast. I'm Katrina and together with our resident local Lucy, we will be exploring some of the amazing stories that make Maastricht so special. So sit back, relax and join us as we learn about our favourite Dutch city. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 32 of the Meet Maastricht podcast, our first podcast for 2021. Yay! I'm here with Lucy. How are you doing, Lucy?
Well, trying to ease myself into a new year with all the old circumstances. Corona will not be letting up for a while yet, so we will be here for a while yet to entertain you at more or less regular intervals on all things Maastricht. And the pods are for we pick a spot and we discuss it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And which spot have we picked for this episode?
Yeah, it's a pretty big one. Again, a building that is almost as unmissable as St. Servaas on the Vrijthof, except that it is in a location where the inner city visitors will not go as easily or frequently. I am talking about what we call the Dome Church. And it is, when you are coming from the city center, it is right behind the train station.
Right. Even though I've been to the train station plenty of times, I don't think I might have seen it, but I never actually looked.
No.
It's passed me by, so I'm interested to learn about it.
Yeah, that would generally be the case. But it's a striking building. I mean, even if you have no idea what it is hard to ignore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and what is it called in Dutch as well?
Koepelkerk.
Oh, okay.
Koepel. Yeah, with that oo sound, which we write OE, which tends to throw the non-Dutch something horrible. So Koepel is dome.
Okay, all right. And where does its story begin?
Well, it begins in the late 19th century, really, with upheavals in the neighboring countries concerned with the fighting between state and church, to put it in very broad strokes. Both in Germany and in France, there was this push and pull of lay states wanting to curtail the influence of especially the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And in Germany that's called the Kulturkampf, so the culture wars. Yes, echoes. I'm not sure French historiography has a specific name for this reckoning, but the thing that happened as a consequence affected the Netherlands.
Yeah.
In the same way. There were lots of religious orders, congregations, figures, leaders crossing the borders into the Netherlands because there was a relative tolerance here.
Okay.
Ever since the Protestants of the North established the territory and pacified it. So Maastricht was under half Protestant rule since 1632, and at the French Revolution, the other overlord of Maastricht, the Catholic bishop, was of course lost his authority here, and the authorities for the entire 19th century were not exactly welcoming, but at least there was no active prosecution going on.
Okay.
So quite a few of it. We have mentioned this before when we were discussing the orders who occupied themselves with educating the children of this city in the 19th century.
Yes.
Quite a few of those were refugees from Germany.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, the order that is involved here is a refugee from the south. This was the founder of this particular order came from France. He founded this order in 1878.
Okay.
and its official name is the Sacerdoce à Sacré-Cœur de Jésus.
Ooh. Was there a Sacred Heart in there somewhere?
It means the priests of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. That's what that means.
Okay.
And that is also why the actual name of the dome church is not the dome church, which obviously refers to the large dome, grand building, but it's called the Sacred Heart Church, the Heilig Hartkerk. That's its actual name.
Ah, okay.
And if you would say that in French, it would be the Sacré-Cœur.
Yeah, I've been to the Sacré-Cœur in Montmartre.
Paris. Yeah, exactly. So that's the same reference, the Sacred Heart of Jesus. That is what these churches are devoted to. But it's nobody knows. We just talk about the Koepelkerk.
So it's a relatively new. I mean, compared with some of our other ones that we've discussed, like our last adventure into Sint-Servaas, it's a baby compared to that one.
Yes, absolutely. It's a completely 20th century creation in the style that was contemporary at the time. But for the most of the, or quite a few of the people here, and especially for the church here, it almost looked like a sacrilege. Church dignitaries tried their best to stop this church being built, at any rate this church being built in this style, because it reminded them of a mosque.
Ah, okay, yes, with the dome.
Yeah, to them it looked like a mosque, and in the original design there were also two towers. They have never been built due to lack of funds, but probably the idea that they would have looked like minarets and reinforced this prejudice might have played a part in this as well.
Yeah.
But it's, I think that I look at this and I sort of think, this is ridiculous, because the mosque that they were referring to at times, the Hagia Sophia in what is now Istanbul, was a church to begin with. So before it became a mosque. So it's sort of entertaining nonsense, this, but they had big fights over it in the 1920s, and this is a marvelous part of the story. This church was designed by two architects, and the oldest was 27 and the youngest was 23.
Oh goodness.
And I think this is just so absolutely heroic to just go ahead and plan this thing out, and then also manage to get it built.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did it have, like you said, a lot of the people who came here they fulfilled sort of social roles. Did it have anything that it sort of specialized in? The people who... Yeah,
this congregation of the priests of the Holy Heart, what they wanted to do most of all was be involved in social work, and we have seen this with the congregations of sisters coming from Germany as well.
Yeah.
The sisters of the poor child Jesus, and these brothers, mostly priests. They had brothers in the congregation as well, but they were mostly priests. They had the same idea, and one of the first things they did was build a humongous orphanage outside of Maastricht. This is when everything beyond the station was no longer Maastricht. That was the municipalities of Heer and Meersen, and of course in the decades after, these would at any rate Heer would be annexed to the municipality of Maastricht. But that was not the case when they started.
Yeah.
So they have started out by building a huge orphanage type institution.
Okay.
Along the road going to Kadierenkeer, and you can still see that. It's a very, very large, light-colored, rectangular building made from stones that were mined close by. They opened up a marl mine in the vicinity specifically to build this orphanage. It also served to house the priests and to have an educational institution for the priests. So the building served all kinds of purposes. But up to the present day, it is being used not so much as an orphanage, but as an institution for young people in difficulty.
Okay.
Its main function as a place where social work is being done has been maintained up to today. And of course, after the Second World War, increasingly, all this work in education and healthcare the religious congregations were doing was being taken over successively by the state.
Yeah.
So it is no longer a religious congregation taking care of these young people, but professionals. Not to say that the priests and the brothers were not professional in what they were doing, but they were not salaried staff with.
Yeah.
So that works sort of differently. So that was how that started on the edge of the city, so to speak.
Yeah.
And of course with an eye to, we have mentioned this in several podcasts before as well, the absolutely shocking amount of children and young people living in terrible conditions in the workers' quarters of Maastricht.
Yes.
Because the city was in a pretty bad state in the 19th century, and it got increasingly worse with the expansion of industry.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine, I don't know, were there a lot of families living around the station area? Because I know when we've spoken about the workers' families and sort of the factories and things, that's the opposite end, sort of.
Yeah.
Like a straight line all the way to the other side. So were there a lot of people living around that area?
No, not at the end of the 19th century when the order came to the Netherlands.
Yeah.
But that changed in successive building campaigns after the city of Maastricht had been annexing territory.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the city of Maastricht was expanding beyond the train tracks.
Yeah.
So at a certain moment, the parish that became the Sacred Heart parish contained about 7,000 people. So, it got populous enough, but, only in the 20th century.
And does the church have any, I guess, particular celebrations? Because I know that when we speak about Saint Servas and Our Sweet Lady, they sort of have their own, well, especially Saint Servas will have its own special celebrations. But does the Koepelkerk have that?
No, because the two churches you mentioned they're pretty much states unto themselves.
Yeah.
And that would mean a different roster of activities. Also, they are both of them are very important places of pilgrimage, which makes for added extra festivities and celebrations going on. Both of those had a separate church for their parishioners. Okay. Of course, Our Sweet Ladies doesn't have that anymore, but St. John's was simply the parish church of Servas, which didn't have the room or the time or the patience for its own parishioners. So they created a separate place for that to take care of the people of Maastricht. But the Koepelkerk has always been just a parish church. Okay. And of course, at first, that parish expanded from very few people living beyond the tracks to quite a lot of people living beyond the tracks. But when the city kept expanding and building new neighborhoods, that helped to shrink the territory of the parish, so also its attendance. And then in the as of the 1970s, of course, church life in the Netherlands has just declined dramatically.
Yeah.
I didn't check. I don't even know if there is still a working parish at the moment.
Okay.
Because so many churches are apart from people leaving the church in droves, there is also an enormous shortage of priests to take care of the celebrations in the churches. So, but it's when you read about what parish life has been like for decades.
Yeah.
So starting at the beginning of the 20th century and for 60, 70 years after that, there is this enormous flowering of schools being founded. So the priests and the brothers of this congregation were teaching in schools for boys, and they sought to an order of sisters founded schools for girls, and this was primary education and this was secondary education. And if you look at the pictures of the processions they would have in the neighborhood and the celebrations of the first Holy Communion, dozens and dozens of children in those celebrations, that is, that just does not happen at all anymore. Of course, all life in those decades was organized around faith in one way or another. So if you were a Catholic, you would join a Catholic union and you would sing in a Catholic choir and you would play in a Catholic brass band and you would, and so on and so forth. And if you were a socialist, you would do all of the same things, but in socialist organizations.
Yes.
And so there was society. We were talking about bubbles now, but the bubbles in those days were pretty extreme as well. But with one enormous advantage that we seem to have lost by now, that all the elites of each bubble in those days, they were speaking to each other.
Yeah.
This was a hierarchical organization of society which maintained the social order and which determined the economic agenda. And of course that was doomed to disappear, of course, for all sorts of good reasons. Just the authoritarianism of it being one. I am not entirely sure we're so much better off now.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the moment everyone is probably craving a bit of club or society, something to spend time with people and with similar interests. And I mean, that's on the surface, that's sort of what it was, to spend time with people who had the same values as you. I think we're all missing at least the social aspect of that. But
oh yeah, absolutely.
We'll get there.
Yeah, we will eventually. Yeah. It is interesting to note that there have been several decades when the grasp and the reach of the Catholic Church was so that it determined almost all aspects of daily life of people who saw themselves as belonging to that community. And it's it is just astounding that has all disappeared in such a very brief time. And there are still remnants, of course. As in the Koepelkerk, of course, had several choirs, and of course they were founded to sing during Mass.
Yeah.
But of course they also functioned as social clubs. So one of their choirs was also known as the Gezellen van de Zaag. Yeah, the song people. It's just a very lumbering sort of translation. Gezellen van de Zaag is much more elegant in Dutch. This choir still exists, and they thought up another iteration of themselves somewhere several decades ago, where they would present themselves during carnival season as the potsvrouwen, meaning the cleaning ladies. And in that guise, they would participate in the carnival parades, and they would be performing on stage with, of course, songs of the season. And of course they've made records. So if you look for potsvrouwen, you will find some of their stuff. And they originate in this church. I didn't know that either. These are some of the juicy tidbits that you dug up when you do these pods.
So with the church's sort of the the originators coming from France, did they maintain any French connection through the years, or has that sort of, once they left, they just, or the people joining the order and stuff, were they tended to be local people, or?
Yeah. The French founder came here and almost immediately had collaborators in local people.
Okay.
Who then did all the work, and then the way it grew and expanded is on the same mold as that of so many comparable orders. They become large national organizations. So they would have, whatever the way of organizing they chose for themselves, and generally they would be called provinces. So there would be a French province, and there would be a Dutch province, and there would be a German province.
Okay.
And generally a province will be the same size or cover the territory of a nation state.
Okay.
And then in each province there would be whatever it was that they were doing, schools and churches, parishes, training institutes, hospitals, orphanages, whatever. Just like in the Middle Ages, except in this 19th, 20th century iteration of religious orders, and providing good works for the people.
Yeah.
And within this Catholic context, and they still exist, but in many cases they will, in their service to society, they will mainly exist in provinces outside of Europe. Inside of Europe, they, in the words of one of them, somewhere in the 1970s, they consider themselves an aging mother who has nursed and educated her children, who have now left home and are capable of fending for themselves. And now the only thing left to do is to have a well taken care of old age. And that is, of course, what has happened to many convents. They are now nursery homes.
Yeah. Yeah, in a very sort of literal sense. They're nursing homes. Yeah, so did they have did that particular order have a lot of missionary or overseas places?
Yeah, they went all over. So like the sisters of Onder de Bogen as well, and Arme Kind Jezus. They were missionaries, but that also is 2-3 generations ago by now, that they were white European missionaries going out into the rest of the world. And now in many of those convents there will be members of their order who come from the former mission areas. So when you see the sisters Onder de Bogen, there will be sisters there from the Philippines or Kenya or like that.
Yeah.
And it's and there are, and when you look at the parish priests of Servaas, one is from Colombia and one is from Sri Lanka.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the result of the work of the missionaries. It's just they're coming back here.
Yeah. Big difference between Sri Lanka and Maastricht.
Yeah. But it's he's learning Dutch. He's trying very hard to be involved in all things local, and and it is funny from a historical perspective, yes, to as a local who having grown up in a city that has been Christian for almost as long as it exists, which this goes back 1700 years.
Yeah.
And then having grown up and seen so much of the influence of the church wane and disappear.
Yeah.
And then to see new people coming in with the same sort of drive and motivation we no longer have.
Yeah.
From very far away. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Really strange. Anyway, I think what is what is still well, there's of course there's loads of stories about the building and the way it was connected to the neighborhood in all sorts of ways. But I think we've touched on all the main points. And the last thing I would like to point out is that I already said that the architects were young and pretty revolutionary in this area, at least, by wanting to be emphatically contemporary, designing a building for a new century, pointing to referring to architectural styles that were coming up in other parts of the country as well. It is often referred to as the Amsterdam School, and you will find quite a few examples of that in the social housing in Amsterdam of the period.
Okay. Absolutely
Grandiose buildings, just absolutely wonderful, and it's a style. And architects know about that. And in Dutch it is also called the nieuwe zakelijkheid, so loosely translatable as new rationalism.
Okay.
So this building is made of reinforced concrete.
Ah, okay. So a bit different to the big stone buildings of some of the other churches. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There is natural stone on the outside. Some of it from close by. So that same marl mine that the orphanage was built out of, some of it from a bit further away, and all of it got, of course, totally blackened by all the steam locomotives that passed it by for decades along the train tracks, and so they had it thoroughly cleaned.
Oh, I bet that was satisfying when it was blasted.
It must have been. It must have been. Then all of a sudden, this black building is sort of
brand new again.
Slightly beige yellow.
Yeah.
And then of course, because of the car exhausts in the decades after that, it got filthy again. And I think they've been cleaning it fairly recently, but it's of course, by now it has required pretty intensive upkeep to keep it in good shape.
Yes, well, it looks like quite a big building as well. So I'm sure it needs plenty of tender loving care.
Yeah, but it's as an architectural creation, it's a pretty stunning space, really. Yeah, we're sort of used to this basilica shape of. A long rectangular hall, and then with pillars along both sides, and this looks completely different. And an interesting thing about the way the church is decorated is, of course, that these young architects in the 1920s and 30s and 50s, the church was really only finished in the 1950s. They also invited their generation artists to provide artwork. So the beautiful stained glass windows and paintings and sculpture, they are all, of course, in this modern church by modern artists.
Wow.
And it was sort of obvious thing to do as well, because they would all meet each other in Café de Suisse on the Vrijthof, where they were known as the Gang of the Swiss, and there's a sort of legendary gathering of artists and intellectuals and who've done lots of good stuff for the city going into the 20th century. Yeah.
Well, I think you guessed my question and you answered it already, but is there anything that you would like to add?
No, when I sort of go silent like this, we're done.
It's the end.
We're done, yeah.
Well, what are we going to be talking about for our next podcast?
Let's just pick something lay again for a change. Yeah, although, there's really no point. I'll have to keep saying this, because this city has been so shaped and influenced and determined in all sorts of ways by the church that there's just no getting away from it. I mean, the lay stuff is really only something from the 1970s.
Yeah.
Really. And I'm not even, in some respects it still isn't. Anyway, I'm going to try and pick something that deals with a lay institution, and that is the Ambachtsschool.
Oh.
School is school, of course, and Ambacht is a trade. So that is a school that will educate young people to be experts in their field of manual work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we look forward to it. Thank you so much for listening to the Meet Maastricht podcast. To keep up to date with all our content and events, make sure to follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram at Meet Maastricht and on Facebook at Come Meet Maastricht. If you love our podcast and would like to see some amazing archival images as you listen, don't forget to subscribe to the Meet Maastricht YouTube channel. If you love what we do and would like to support the Meet Maastricht team, you can also donate through PayPal via our website meetmaastricht.eu. Meet Maastricht is definitely a labour of love, and all of the revenue we make through our tours and events currently goes towards administration costs. With your help, we would love to be able to give back a little something to the team so we can all keep bringing you our favourite stories and showing you our favourite places in Maastricht. Thanks again, and tune in next time to learn more about our beautiful city.
Tot ziens.